My parents offered to pay for my entire $40,000 wedding after giving my golden child older brother $500,000 as a wedding gift, so I accepted, thinking that they finally saw me as their child. But then I received an email requesting all the money back, so I paid them back but not in the way they expected. At just 4 years old, I was able to recite a poem in Spanish to my parents, because I had an ulterior motive, to get the last cookie from the cookie jar. But they just nodded their heads, took the last cookie and handed it to my 8-year-old brother, all because he had gone to the bathroom by himself for once. This pretty much set the tone for the rest of my relationship with my parents. Growing up, he got the latest gadgets, nicer clothes, and way more attention, whereas I made do with hand-me-downs and started working weekend jobs at 14 to buy things I wanted. But the real shock hit when Jake, now 34, got married 4 years ago. My parents handed him and his wife a staggering $500,000 as their wedding present, which funded their gorgeous home in an affluent neighborhood. Despite feeling a slight sting, I genuinely felt happy for him at the time, especially since my own life was progressing smoothly. I had tucked away decent savings and was dating Alex, aka the love of my life. And fast forward to last summer when Alex proposed. I was absolutely ecstatic. We budgeted around $40,000, which seemed reasonable for the classy yet understated wedding we envisioned. And then, once again, my parents shocked me. But this time, it was in a good way, because out of nowhere, they volunteered to cover the entire wedding cost. I felt touched beyond words. For once, it seemed like they were acknowledging me as equally important. At the time, I believed it wasn't worth overthinking. Our wedding day was the calm before the storm, so to speak. My parents delivered heartfelt speeches, danced with us, and appeared sincerely joyful. Then, 2 days after the wedding, I received an email from my father. I expected it to be something about our honeymoon, or even a simple thank you for the wedding invite. But instead, it was a meticulously itemized invoice, basically a receipt, detailing every little expense they'd covered for the wedding. The message was brief and cold. We expect prompt payment. I stared at my screen, completely stunned. The invoice totaled $39,782.45, accounting for everything down to the last appetizer and flower arrangement. My stomach twisted into knots. Alex discovered me frozen in place, angry tears streaming down my face, curled in a ball. Well, he was absolutely livid. Money wasn't the issue. We could afford it if necessary, but that wasn't the point. My parents approached me, presented it as a gift, and even appeared excited to participate in planning. The more I reflected, the angrier I became. It felt like all the emotional baggage from years of favoritism had all led up to this one cruel act. The next morning, after a sleepless night discussing everything with Alex, I made my decision. I wrote my parents a check for the full amount and enclosed a letter. I avoided confronting them directly, knowing I couldn't maintain emotional composure, and I didn't want this devolving into a shouting match. In my letter, I reminded them that I'd been independent since age 15, paying my own way while watching them lavish everything on Jake. I held nothing back. I talked about their differential treatment and how I never complained, their cruel bait and switch tactic, treating me like a stranger. And finally, I finished it off by letting them know I would decline any future offers of assistance from them, including inheritance. After mailing the check and letter, I blocked their numbers. But then, complete radio silence followed. For days, I heard nothing from them, which only intensified my anger. But after a few days passed, I missed the peace, because I was getting spammed with hate and threats by my own family members. Messages from extended family members started flooding in. Distant cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends began calling and texting, accusing me of being ungrateful and dramatic. They claimed my parents had done so much for me, and that I was blowing everything out of proportion. Jake called too, screaming about how I was destroying the family. He insisted I should have just paid the invoice without creating drama. Typical Jake behavior, always siding with them. Why wouldn't he? I haven't responded to anyone. I'm not sure what to say. On one hand, I feel completely justified. After years of second-class treatment, this felt like the final straw, and I needed to stand up for myself. On the other hand, I wonder if I'm overreacting. Am I being too sensitive? Was it unreasonable to expect they'd treat my wedding as a gift like they did Jake's? Should I have just paid the invoice and moved on? Alex's family has been incredibly supportive throughout this ordeal. His parents were horrified when they learned what my parents had done and check on us daily, but the constant messages from my side of the family are wearing me down. I'm questioning whether I made the right choice. Did I handle this incorrectly? Should I have tried talking to my parents before cutting contact? Or was I right to finally draw a boundary after years of feeling less valued than Jake? I'm truly stuck now and unsure if I'm actually wrong here. Part of me believes I had every right to be upset and defend myself, but another part wonders if I've created an irreparable family rift. Maybe I should have approached this differently. Any thoughts? Update 1. Since posting, things have gotten considerably worse. I never imagined sending that check and letter would trigger such chaos, but here we are. Yesterday morning, I awoke to an email from my mother. It slipped through because she used her company email, which I hadn't blocked yet. Her message was lengthy and self-righteous. She claimed the invoice wasn't meant to be taken seriously. According to her, they never actually intended to cash the check. The whole thing was supposedly a life lesson about financial responsibility. They allegedly wanted to test my reaction, and once they felt I'd learned their lesson, planned to tear up the check and surprise me with a $120,000 gift as my real wedding present. I couldn't believe what I was reading. A life lesson? What kind of parents trick their adult daughter this way? After reading this, it became crystal clear that this wasn't about fairness or love. It was about control. They wanted to see if I'd comply blindly or push back. It felt manipulative and cruel. Without hesitation, I immediately mobile deposited the check. No way was I letting them tear it up after this lesson. I wanted it cashed, forcing them to feel the weight of their actions. In response to my mother's email, I sent a brief reply. Thank you for confirming this was, indeed, a deliberate test rather than a misunderstanding. Then I blocked her work email too. I anticipated more contact attempts, but had zero interest in additional games or so-called lessons. That evening, situations escalated further when Jake appeared at my condo unannounced. He pounded loudly on my door, shouting my name. I initially didn't answer, hoping he'd eventually leave, but that didn't happen. Instead, he began yelling through the door, claiming I was being childish and blowing everything out of proportion. He insisted our parents were just teaching me responsibility because they worried about my spending habits. That comment, especially coming from Jake, made my blood boil. This was the same guy guy who never paid his own cell phone bills, never worked without parental support, yet had the audacity to lecture me about financial responsibility. While he continued ranting, I quietly recorded everything on my phone. Unsure what might happen next, I wanted evidence in case the situation became messier. Jake rambled endlessly about how I was destroying the family over something trivial, and that I should apologize to our parents and move forward. He claimed they never intended to hurt me and had always done their best for both of us. He kept insisting I was overreacting and the entire situation was my fault. I remained silent, refusing to open the door. I just sat there listening, silently fuming. Eventually, after what felt like forever, he left, but not before calling me selfish and accusing me of trying to sever family ties over money. After he departed, I sat quietly for a while, feeling overwhelmed by everything. Jake's outburst only confirmed what I'd always known. He would perpetually take their side, regardless of how unreasonable or hurtful their actions were. That night, more messages poured in from extended family. Apparently, Jake went straight to my parents after failing to speak with me, and now they were rallying everyone against me. My phone flooded with texts from aunts, uncles, and several family friends. Most messages followed an identical pattern, calling me ungrateful, accusing me of causing unnecessary drama, and urging me to apologize for how I'd treated them. One message particularly struck me from an aunt I hadn't heard from in years. She claimed I was fortunate to have parents who cared enough to teach such lessons, and that I should be grateful they spent anything on my wedding. She concluded by saying I was lucky to even have parents who wanted involvement in my life. I couldn't believe how quickly everyone turned against me. It seemed they'd all decided my parents were right simply because they possessed the money and power. Nobody seemed concerned about the emotional manipulation or years of favoritism leading to this point. They only saw me rejecting their supposed generosity, which was sufficient for everyone to side against me. By this point, Alex worried about how much this affected me. He kept asking if I wanted a break from social media and to turn off my phone temporarily for peace. He reassured me I wasn't wrong, reminding me of all the times my parents showed favoritism toward Jake and how they always used money to manipulate us both. The most frustrating aspect was my inability to get straightforward answers. My parents weren't reaching out to explain themselves further. They truly believed their narrative, portraying themselves as misunderstood parents just trying to help, while I was the ungrateful daughter who exaggerated everything. I began wondering if I should have handled things differently. Maybe instead of sending that letter and blocking them, I should have had a proper conversation. But then again, I knew how those conversations typically went. They'd twist everything until I ended up apologizing for feeling hurt initially. It was a cycle I'd been trapped in for years, and I lacked energy to repeat it. For now, I'm focusing on the life Alex and I are building together. We can't do much except hope things improve eventually. Update 2. Hey everyone, I want to begin by thanking you all for your responses. Reading your comments, advice, and personal stories has truly helped me process recent events. It's been an emotional roller coaster, and your support means more than you realize. While I've tried maintaining strength, things have taken another unexpected turn. A few days after Jake's visit, I received a call from my father's brother, my uncle. We hadn't spoken in years, and honestly, I expected him to echo everyone else's sentiment about reconciling with my parents. Instead, his revelations completely transformed my perspective. He began by mentioning he'd heard about our situation through family gossip and felt compelled to contact me because, apparently, this wasn't their first manipulative stunt. 20 years ago, something similar happened between him and my grandparents, my father's parents. My uncle refused to tolerate their manipulative tactics, resulting in them smearing his reputation throughout the family, accusing him of theft and ingratitude for everything they'd provided. He explained that back then, my father didn't support him. In fact, he sided with their parents, creating a massive rift between the brothers that never fully healed. My uncle always felt abandoned by my father, and it took years to understand how their family operated. Hearing him describe the past mirrored my own experience in different contexts. My grandparents had used money and manipulation to control my uncle, exactly like my parents were attempting with me now. As he continued, everything started making sense. My parents weren't behaving out of character. They were repeating patterns established long before my birth. They learned this behavior from their own parents, and my father, having enabled his brother's situation years ago, was now playing the same role with me. My uncle mentioned that his refusal to comply with my grandparents' demands carried severe consequences. After their fallout, they completely cut him off financially and emotionally. They portrayed him as the family's black sheep, and even today, relatives believe the lies spread about him. It was entirely about control, he explained, and when they couldn't control him anymore, they erased him from their lives. His story sent chills down my spine. It perfectly mirrored my current situation. My parents were upset because I refused to play their game, and rather than understanding my viewpoint, they turned the entire family against me. I began recognizing how deeply this toxic cycle ran, and how entrenched my parents were in believing they could control their children through manipulation. After our conversation, I couldn't stop contemplating everything he shared. It made me wonder if, deep down, my father's behavior stemmed from guilt. Perhaps he knew he'd abandoned his brother years ago and was now justifying his actions by doubling down on identical tactics. My parents ha. In subsequent days, family members continued messaging me. Clearly, Jake had been working overtime rallying people against me. One cousin I'd always been close with sent a lengthy text claiming I was selfish and disrespectful for not appreciating everything my parents had done. She said it wasn't too late to fix things, but I needed to humble myself and apologize before it was too late. Her message contained identical rhetoric everyone else used, which was exhausting to read. I realized I was raised in a family where love came with conditions. Everything involved strings, whether financial help, emotional support, or even celebrating life events like weddings. Now that I'd refused to follow their rules, I was being isolated, just like my uncle had been. Alex remained my foundation throughout this ordeal. After my uncle's call, we had a lengthy discussion about our future. He assured me that regardless of what happens, we'd overcome this together, and that I owed nothing to anyone, not my parents, not Jake, and certainly not extended family members who suddenly became amateur psychologists. His unwavering support has been beyond invaluable. Despite Alex's support, I still felt conflicted. My parents had significantly damaged me emotionally, and part of me still wondered if I was mistaken. Was there a way to repair things without compromising my boundaries? I spent hours debating internally, trying to determine if reconciliation was possible possible without sacrificing my mental health. Then something unexpected occurred. I received a voicemail from my father, his first direct contact since I'd sent the letter and check. His voice sounded different, not angry or demanding as expected, but tired. He mentioned not wanting to continue fighting and willingness to talk if I was open to it. While he didn't apologize or acknowledge what happened, something had clearly shifted. Perhaps he was beginning to realize I wouldn't back down this time. I haven't responded yet. Part of me wants to call back and explore the possibility of an honest conversation about everything, but another part recognizes this could be another manipulation attempt to make me feel guilty. My uncle's words keep echoing. They'll never admit wrongdoing because they don't believe they're wrong. If I decide to speak with my father, I must prepare for the possibility that nothing changes. Currently, I'm still processing everything. Revelations from my uncle, family messages, my father's voicemail. It's overwhelming, and I'm uncertain about my next step. I want to believe my parents can change, finally seeing me as an equal rather than someone to control, but I also recognize that after years of such treatment, a single conversation won't repair the damage. For now, I'm taking each day as it comes. Alex and I are concentrating on our lives and future together, trying to build something healthy and free from toxic family patterns. Yet tension persists. Am I doing right by maintaining my position, or am I pushing away my only family? As much as I wish for clarity, I remain uncertain. Perhaps that's acceptable for now. I'll update as things develop, but currently, I'm navigating this situation as best I can. Update 3. Hi everyone. First, I want to express how thankful I am for all your responses. Your advice and support have been priceless while dealing with this family disaster. When I initially posted, I had no idea where things were heading or what I wanted, but after reading your comments and considerable reflection, I've reached important conclusions. Something that really resonated from your responses was how many pointed out that I've been forcing myself to repair relationships with my parents, trying to patch things up and pretend everything was normal. But truthfully, I've finally accepted that it's okay if things don't return to normal because, honestly, I'm not even sure what normal actually was. My relationship with my parents was always unhealthy, and I've spent years ignoring that fact. Now I realize it's acceptable to abandon the idea that things will ever meet my expectations. Many of you suggested I might have been too generous in my assumptions about my father's guilt. Looking back, I see I was clinging to hope that maybe his behavior stemmed from guilt and that he could change. You were right. It doesn't justify his actions or excuse years of manipulation, favoritism, and emotional control. No matter how guilty he might feel, it doesn't erase the harm inflicted or mean I should forgive him for it. Simultaneously, I recognized my need for closure, to end this chapter of my life, regardless of whether it involves reconciliation with my parents. So I decided to meet with my father, feeling it was necessary for my own closure, not theirs. Meeting him, I immediately noticed he wasn't the same intimidating figure from my childhood. He appeared worn down, almost defeated, and for the first time ever, genuinely apologetic. He didn't explicitly say, "I'm sorry," but he apologized for how the wedding situation unfolded and for how both my mother and Jake had treated me. He even mentioned speaking with relatives and asking them to stop harassing me, which provided slight relief. Then he did something unexpected. He attempted returning the money. He produced the same check I'd sent for wedding expenses and slid it across the table, asking me to take it back. He explained that he and my mother had discussed it and wanted to make amends. This time I was prepared. I clearly stated I wouldn't take back the money. I emphasized this wasn't merely about money, but about everything that had transpired over years, consistently being treated as second best and the emotional toll it had taken. I explained that reclaiming the money wouldn't fix that, and this wasn't simply a financial transaction anymore. I could see his frustration when I refused. It seemed he didn't know what else to offer. In his mind, returning the money constituted an apology, but it didn't address deeper issues that had festered for years. He couldn't comprehend that the damage wasn't something a check could undo. After my refusal, he sat quietly for several minutes before saying he didn't want to lose me. He acknowledged things had gone too far and didn't want our family torn apart. While he seemed sincere, I realized I wasn't seeking reconciliation as he envisioned it. I wasn't interested in reverting to our previous dynamic, pretending everything could magically improve. I needed space, a genuine break from the toxic relationship that had defined our interactions for so long. So I told him I needed time away from the family, and that while this meeting was important, it changed very little. I explained I wasn't ready to simply forgive and forget. I needed time to heal on my terms. Surprisingly, he didn't argue. He simply nodded and said he understood, without trying to convince me to return or accusing me of overreacting as he had previously. In some ways, that acknowledgement meant more than anything else he could have said. Leaving the meeting, I experienced mixed emotions. I wasn't angry, but neither was I relieved. I'd hoped for closure, but closure isn't as neat as we desire. There was no clear resolution, no dramatic reconciliation or emotional breakthrough. It was simply concluded. I'd expressed what I needed to, and now it was my responsibility to move forward. Since then, I've taken steps to protect my peace. I've blocked additional family members who continued harassing me, and Alex and I are focusing on building our life without constant family drama. Having breathing room has been refreshing, though part of me remains conflicted. I know I made the right decision standing up for myself, but that doesn't make it easy. Some days I wonder if I could have handled things differently, or given my parents another chance. Then I remember years of feeling inadequate and remind myself I deserve better. Jake, predictably, hasn't contacted me since meeting with my father. I suspect he remains upset about the fallout, but at this point, I'm not interested in mending things with him either. He's clearly demonstrated where his loyalties lie, and I've accepted our relationship will never reach its potential. I'm okay with that now. Releasing the fantasy that we could ever be close has been painful, yet liberating. Regarding my father, the future remains uncertain. He seemed genuinely remorseful, but I'm unsure if that's sufficient to rebuild our relationship. For now, I'll continue prioritizing myself and my happiness. If there's one lesson from this experience, it's that I deserve to put myself first for once, and that's exactly what I'll do. So that's where things stand currently. It's not the happy ending I might have wanted, but it's the conclusion I needed. Sometimes, that's enough. Thank you again to everyone following along and offering support. I appreciate it more than words can express.